Am I the antagonist for avoiding my parents after discovering they were spreading super inappropriate lies about my husband and I? Last year, my husband and I met my parents, aunt, and uncle for Thanksgiving. They had been vacationing together a few days prior. As we were leaving, my visibly upset aunt pulled me aside and asked if we could talk in a few days. When I called her later, she explained that she heard something shocking. She said that my parents had told her a completely false story about how my current husband and I met. They claimed that I met him while online looking for a threesome with my ex-husband, which led to the end of my previous marriage. This was completely untrue. I was shocked by this, as the real story is that we met at work through mutual friends, and our romantic relationship developed over time. I had even introduced our mutual friends to my parents at our wedding as the ones who brought us together. I confronted my parents about their lies, but they insisted that I told them that story. This angered me further, and my dad even got angry at me and my mom stormed off during the conversation. They tried to gaslight me and diminish the seriousness of the issue. A few days later, my cousin informed me that my dad had told her husband the same false story almost 8 years ago. They had believed it until now and apologized for not speaking up earlier. My husband and I emailed my parents, explaining what we had discovered and asking them why they made up the story and who else they had told. However, our email exchanges over the past year have been unproductive. They keep changing their story and shifting the blame. They have also downplayed the issue, claiming that no one thinks less of us because of it. This is unacceptable as the story they fabricated never happened. The only apology we received was for upsetting us, not for lying about their own daughter for a decade. Recently, they have demanded that we forgive them and move on. However, we have not been able to forgive them yet. They have held us responsible for our mother's constant crying and have accused us of tearing the family apart. So am I the asshole for wanting to continue avoiding my parents even though it may be causing family strain? Your parents have spread false and damaging information about you and your husband for years. They have repeatedly lied and gaslighted you when confronted with the truth. It is completely understandable that you don't want to continue a relationship with them. Your parents' attempts to shift the blame and diminish the seriousness of their actions only show their lack of remorse and accountability. Forgiveness is something that should be earned, not demanded. It is up to you to decide if and when you are ready to forgive. But it is not your responsibility to keep the family together at the expense of your own well-being. Taking a step back and avoiding contact with your parents is a healthy decision to protect yourself from further manipulation and hurt. Focus on your relationship with your husband and surround yourself with supportive people who respect and love you for who you truly are. Am I the antagonist for being the reason my younger siblings said no to being adopted by our stepmom? I am a 16-year-old male, the oldest of 4 siblings. My siblings are Kalia, 13-year-old female, Thea, 11-year-old female, and Dex, 10-year-old male. Our mom passed away 8 years ago. Kalia and I are the only ones who remember her, and I have more memories of her than Kalia does. However, we have always shared stories of our mom with Thea and Dex. I also have a collection of photos and videos that they have seen, and they do ask about her, even to our dad sometimes. 2 years after mom died, my dad met my stepmom and they got married fairly quickly, about 7 months later. They initially talked about her adopting all 4 of us, but I refused. There was some discussion between my dad and stepmom, and they decided to postpone the adoption until she could adopt all of us together. Since my stepmom was relatively new to me, it felt strange to have someone offer to adopt me only 5 months after meeting them, especially knowing that both she and my dad were aware that I still remembered my mom. None of my siblings have ever referred to our stepmom as mom. Thea and Dex call her by a nickname, while Kalia and I call her by her name. However, my siblings consider her a parent, whereas I see her more as my dad's wife. The topic of adoption has never fully gone away, and a couple of years ago, I did some research. I discovered that adoption would change my birth certificate, and a new one would be issued with my stepmom's name replacing my mom's name as my mother. I delved into the subject as I knew it would become a significant issue sooner or later. I even had a web chat with a local lawyer who was knowledgeable about these matters. A few months ago, my siblings asked why I mentioned the downsides of being adopted. I explained to them that our stepmom's name would take the place of our mom's name on our birth certificates, and I didn't want that to happen on mine. I showed them the information I had found. Kalia understood, and Thea and Dex grasped the concept when we simplified it for them. Last week, my dad and stepmom broached the subject of adoption again. My dad said it would be the final time, or else they would proceed with her adopting my siblings. I maintained my stance and delivered a detailed speech explaining why. My stepmom suggested that I could always frame my original birth certificate if it would make me feel better and people would still see it. But I would still be adopted and considered her son. However, I declined. When they approached my siblings, they all refused and expressed that they had not realized our mom's name would be replaced, and they did not want that. My dad and stepmom tried to persuade them to change their minds, but they all stood firm and said they didn't want it. Kalia mentioned that they had only agreed because they felt obligated, not because they genuinely wanted to be adopted. My dad was furious with me and blamed me for their change of heart. He accused me of depriving them of the security that adoption would provide and ensuring that they would never truly see our stepmom as their mom after such a clear boundary had been set. Am I the asshole? It's understandable that you don't want your stepmom to replace your birth mom on your birth certificate, especially since you have vivid memories of your mom. It's also understandable that your dad and stepmom want to create a sense of unity and security within the family through adoption. It's important to remember that everyone's feelings and perspectives in this situation are valid. While it's not your fault that your siblings changed their minds about adoption, it's understandable why your dad is frustrated. It might be helpful for you and your family to have an open and honest conversation about your concerns and find a compromise that works for everyone. Am I the antagonist for calling my fiancé manipulative? My fiancé and I have been together for 4 years and living together for 2. I am a lawyer specializing in commercial real estate, and I wanted a prenuptial agreement. It wasn't something I had considered until our relationship became serious, but once it did, I discussed it with her. I also watched some YouTube videos about men facing financial losses in divorces, which made me uneasy. However, when I brought up the idea of a prenup, she became extremely angry and accused me of trying to take advantage of her. One of the reasons I wanted a prenup was because my parents wanted me to. They have some assets, including $1 million house in an expensive city, that they intend to pass on to me. After heated arguments lasting for 6 months, I agreed to drop the prenup conversation. I decided to do this because my fiancé's salary is high. She is hardworking and comes from a well-educated and fairly affluent family. I believed that she would not try to take my money. Additionally, it seemed that she disliked the idea of agreeing to sign a prenup due to her pride. I inadvertently mentioned my parents' desire for the prenup, which strained their relationship and led to arguments between my father and me. We are now very close to the wedding, just 2 months away. We have planned to have the wedding in Amalfi Coast, Italy. Surprisingly, my fiancé handed me a prenup and asked me to have a lawyer specializing in such matters review and sign it. Upon initial examination, the prenup included most of what I wanted and also accounted for some of her wishes. It seemed fair. I was taken aback because she had initially been strongly against the prenup. I had argued with my parents on her behalf, which caused tension between us. In my frustration, I called her manipulative, but she asserted that she had not been okay with the prenup initially, and it took months of therapy for her to understand her own reasons. She believed that I should have enough trust in her not to screw me over, especially considering that I proposed to her. Now that I have done so, she was willing to agree to the prenup I wanted. She argued that I wanted a prenup because of sexist ideas from YouTube and the influence of my parents, and she needed to determine if I would prioritize her over those influences. While I'm still angry, technically she agreed to the prenup. We have enough time to review and sign it, but I'm upset about the way in which she agreed to it, feeling as though she planned this move as a test for me. Am I the jerk in this situation? While you initially wanted a prenup due to concerns about divorce and potentially receiving assets from your parents, your fiancé interpreted it as you not trusting her and wanting to take advantage of her. It's understandable that she felt hurt and indignant about it. However, it's important to note that it is not fair to label her as manipulative or deceitful for reconsidering and ultimately agreeing to the prenup. People's feelings and perspectives can change over time, especially after therapy or introspection. It's possible that she truly wanted to be sure you were committed to the relationship and saw your willingness to propose without a prenup as a sign of trust. Going forward, it would be beneficial for both of you to have open and honest conversations about your concerns, fears, and expectations. It's essential to foster trust and empathy in any relationship, particularly when it comes to issues that involve finances and assets. Consider seeking the guidance of a couples therapist to help facilitate these discussions and work through any underlying insecurities or misunderstandings. Am I the antagonist for disrespecting my husband's religious views? I, 53-year-old woman, have been married to my husband Peter, 51-year-old man, for 17 years. We have 2 kids, Joan, 15 years old, and Eric, 17 years old. Peter and I have been best friends for the majority of our time together, but things changed. About a year ago, Peter got into a car accident. He got hit by a drunk driver and was in a coma for a month. It was a really rough time for the family, and the kids and I were pretty much constantly by his side when we weren't at work or school. Thankfully, he pulled through, and he was able to get back to his life after months of recovery and intense physical therapy. Things started to feel like they were going back to normal until he became super religious a few weeks ago. He started to believe that God had saved him and that he needed to use the second chance he was given to spread the gospel. I'm all for people expressing their religion, but he has latched onto a very conservative type of Christianity, and it is causing a lot of friction between us. Eric is currently in his senior year of high school and is working on the college application process now. Joan has been watching this and is very interested. The other day, she came to me crying, saying she'd asked her dad what colleges were good for computer science since she's been very interested in coding for a while now, and her dad said she wouldn't be going to college since her future job was to be a wife and mother, and college would be wasted on her. To say I was furious would be an understatement. I went to him and asked him why he said that. He replied that he was spreading the good word, and he wanted to make sure we didn't lead our children into a sinful alternative lifestyle. I asked him if he expected me to quit my job. I work from home as an accountant, and focus on being a wife and mother too, and he said that he'd wanted to talk to me about this for a while. He said that he wanted me to quit my job since it is not suitable for a woman. This absolutely blindsided me since he'd never expressed anything like this before. I told him that I would not be quitting my job, and our daughter would go to college whether he approved or not. He rolled his eyes and said I'd come around. It escalated last night. Joan was going to go to the movies with a couple of friends, and she came down wearing a pair of jeans and a crop top. Typical teenager stuff, nothing she hadn't worn before. Peter stopped her and told her she had to change. She asked why, and he said he wasn't going to let her leave the house looking like a skank. I was shocked. He'd never used language like that before. I told her to leave just as she was, and she left. Peter asked if I even cared about our daughter's soul, and I told him it's her body. She could dress herself how she wanted. He said her body is the property of God, not her, and that I needed to respect his religion. I told him I'd never respect a religion that treats women like second-class citizens, and he left the house in a huff. He hasn't come back yet. Am I the asshole? You are not the a-hole in this situation. It is completely understandable and justified for you to be furious and upset with your husband's sudden change in beliefs and behavior. His newly embraced conservative Christianity seems to be causing a lot of friction and negatively impacting your family dynamic. It is concerning that he is trying to dictate your children's future and limit their potential based on his religious beliefs about gender roles. Everyone should have the opportunity to pursue their own interests and dreams, including your daughter who wants to pursue computer science. It is not fair for your husband to dismiss her aspirations. Additionally, his derogatory and disrespectful language towards your daughter is completely inappropriate. No one should use such derogatory language, especially towards their own child. It is commendable that you stood up for your daughter's right to dress herself and express herself as she chooses. Respecting someone's religion does not mean accepting or condoning harmful beliefs or practices. It is important to uphold the values of equality, respect, and personal autonomy within a family. Am I the antagonist for how I handled someone using my laptop without my permission? I'm a 21-year-old female college student. One of my professors has an interactive approach to office hours, where one student is selected to write on the board while we collectively work on a homework problem. On a particular day, I was sitting near the front of the room, close to the board, during office hours. Another student named Anne, whom I'm not close with, was sitting at the back of the room. The professor chose Anne to be the person writing on the board. I had the homework sheet open on my laptop and was looking at it while taking some notes. Since Anne had left her laptop at the back of the room, she took my laptop from me without asking and began using it. I must admit I felt mildly annoyed and disrespected. Firstly, she just took my laptop without saying a word to me. I am usually happy to help others and wouldn't have minded her using it, but it is common courtesy to ask for permission before using someone else's belongings. Personally, I would always ask someone before touching their laptop, especially if I don't know them well. Secondly, I was clearly using the laptop and taking notes on a different question, but she turned it away from me and scrolled to a different question, which I found a little disrespectful. Nevertheless, despite feeling a bit annoyed, I was prepared to let it go. It wasn't a major issue. However, my good friend Laura, who was sitting next to me, seemed to sense my annoyance. As Anne was speaking to the professor, still holding my laptop, Laura chuckled and whispered to me, "She just took your laptop, bro." I whispered back, "I know, and she didn't even ask." Laura nodded and replied, "I know." We didn't think Anne would hear our conversation since she was talking to the professor. However, it turned out that she overheard us and became deeply offended. I learned this from Jane, who is a mutual friend of both Anne and me. Jane mentioned that Anne was complaining about how I had apparently been rude to her. Personally, I don't believe I did anything wrong. We didn't say anything rude or insulting about Anne, just that she took my laptop without my permission. And let's be fair, it was kind of impolite of Anne to take my laptop without asking. Now, I understand that nobody is perfect, including myself. There have been times when I made mistakes and forgot my manners. If I were in Anne's shoes and someone called me out, I would also feel uncomfortable, but I would apologize to them, or at the very least make sure not to repeat the same action. Anne is portraying me as the rude person when she is the one who snatched my laptop while I was using it. Laura supports my perspective, while Jane sides with Anne. Therefore, I would like to hear others' opinions. Am I the bad guy here? It was not rude of you to express your annoyance to your friend in a whisper, especially considering Anne took your laptop without asking. It is common courtesy to ask before using someone else's belongings, especially if you don't know them well. You did not say anything rude or insulting about Anne. It seems like Anne overreacted by getting offended and complaining about you being rude. Am I the antagonist for no longer wanting to attend a group for adoptees? My parents adopted me and all my siblings, some from foster care and some through an agency as infants. I'm one of the infant adoptees. My birth mother did not want to have children and found out later in the pregnancy, so she was unable to terminate the pregnancy like she wanted. She left me a letter explaining this. I believe she did it because my parents were always big on being honest and maintaining open communication with our birth parents, and she wanted to close that chapter with me for good. My parents were upset when I read the letter at 12. My birth mother's words were harsh. Anyway, my parents have always been involved in the adoptee community. They felt it was important for us to be around others, so adoption would be normalized, and for us to have friends who could understand our experiences. I never felt fully comfortable in the group, and I've recently realized why. Now that I'm a teenager, I can attend a more mature kids group without parents or siblings. I have always known that adoptees have different perspectives on adoption. My siblings and I agree on many things, but through the group, I've realized that not everyone feels the same way. The older group I attend now has very different views from mine, and it can be quite overwhelming. They all believe open adoption should be mandatory, and birth parents should be required to meet the children they give up for adoption. They often refer to their adoptive parents as their additional moms or dads, creating a two moms, two dads situation. However, I only have two parents, my adoptive parents. There have been heated debates when I express this. Some in the group even believe that adoption shouldn't exist, and children should be allowed to keep their original birth certificates, with adoptive parents only serving as caregivers without legal parental rights. While I understand this perspective for some, I don't want the woman who gave me up to be considered my only mother. I love my parents, and I'm grateful that my birth certificate reflects them and not someone I don't know. I also have no desire to meet my birth mother. It simply doesn't interest me. All of this has been quite stressful, and I have expressed to my parents that I no longer want to attend the group. This includes the larger adoption community. My siblings and parents fully support this decision and have also decided to stop attending. Some members of the group, both adoptees and parents, were annoyed by our departure. When they asked why, I explained my reasons. They told me I shouldn't distance myself from people who understand me and that I need a support network of fellow adoptees. Although my parents may disagree with my choice, I know they are disappointed in me for leaving the group. Am I the asshole? It's important to prioritize your own mental and emotional well-being. And if attending the adoptee group is causing you stress and discomfort, it is completely okay for you to decide to stop participating. Adoption experiences vary for each individual, and it seems like your feelings and perspectives on adoption differ from those in the group. Your parents and siblings are supporting your decision, and that should be respected. It is unfair for others to criticize your choice and pressure you into staying in a situation that makes you uncomfortable. While having a support network is valuable, it doesn't mean you have to force yourself into a space that doesn't align with your beliefs or provide you with the support you need. You have the right to choose who you surround yourself with and how you seek support. Thanks for watching. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist in the description.